Back on February 25th, one of my cows over at the winter pasture, after a somewhat prolonged labor, gave birth to a little black white-faced bull calf that came into this world with some big problems. Over the last couple of months, I've done my best that I can do, at least I felt, to nurse this guy back to health, and finally I had to get a vet involved to sort of see what this guy's future might look like. Today, we're going to talk about what the vet said and what had to be done. That's what we're talking about today on Farmer Tyler Ranch. If you're new to the channel, or at least new to this story, I feel like I should kind of recap everything that's happened up to this point so that, this all kind of makes sense to you. So back in February, I got the phone call that this calf had been born and he was in trouble. So I went down to the winter pasture, and when I found him, he was stretched out on his side, and I thought he was dead. Upon a closer look, I could see that he was still alive, but he did not look good. Usually when calves stretch out on their side like that, that's a really bad sign, and that means that the end is near. But despite being faced with that sort of negative impression, I decided to go ahead and load him up into the side-by-side and bring him back home and see if I could get at least some bit of nutrition into him. When I found the calf, it was unclear as to whether or not he had nursed, but he certainly was having a tough time on his feet, so I assumed that he probably hadn't. With his rather poor physical condition, I just felt like trying to get him to nurse off of his mother was going to be more trouble and very likely be unsuccessful. So that's why I decided to bring him home and get him going on a bottle. I had some powdered colostrum at home. Probably the best thing to do in this case would have been to milk it out of the mother cow and give it to him that way. But when time is of the essence, sometimes that might not be the best choice. I knew the calf was in bad shape when I put him in the back of the side-by-side because he just laid in the back the entire way home. I think it's like 2 or 3 miles, maybe 4 miles from the winter pasture back to my house, and he laid down the whole time. When I got him home, he could barely, well, actually, he couldn't pick his head up, and his nose was cold and his tongue was cold. So I thought that he was done right then and there. I came out in a little while to check on him, and he actually had sort of perked up a little bit. So it was at that point that I decided to give him a bottle. And then when I set him down in here, he actually held his head up for a minute. So he might not be as far gone as I thought. I went ahead and mixed up a bottle. I still don't have a lot of hope for this guy, but I'm going to try to feed him something, and we'll put a heat lamp on him tonight and just see what happens. And lo and behold, I actually did get him to nurse and consume a little bit of the formula that I had. Without really having a good pen to put him in or a good place to keep him, I put him in the stock trailer with a heat lamp, thinking that that would protect him from the elements. He'd have a roof, he'd have walls to keep rain and wind out, and the aluminum sides of the trailer should kind of absorb some of the heat from the heat lamp and give him at least the best environment that I could give him. Over the next couple of weeks, I bottle fed him in the trailer, and his physical condition improved a little bit, but it started to become very clear to me that he was blind. For one, you could see it in his actual eyeballs. They just didn't look right. And I could tell when I would offer him the bottle, he could hear me, and he knew I was in there, but I would hold the bottle right in front of his face, but maybe like off to the side, only 10 inches or so. And he would really struggle to find it. At this point, I started giving him medications for his eyes, hoping that maybe this was something that could be cleared up. And I think over time, they started to look better, but I don't really feel like he had ever regained his vision. It was also around this time that I noticed his mobility was very diminished, and every time he would get up on his feet, he was very stiff-legged and he just didn't move well. I didn't know if this was a result of being cooped up in the trailer. I didn't know if it was a result of him being blind. And, my thought process at the time was, well, if you come into this world blind, maybe you don't have a lot of incentive to get up and look at things because you can't see anything. So it could have been a combination of these things working together. It could have been some sort of physical ailment that was preventing him from walking and moving like a normal calf would. So because I had these questions and he was, I thought, in some ways getting better, he would get on his feet a little bit more readily and his appetite was getting better. He was starting to consume 2 full bottles a day, which I thought was encouraging. So I decided to take him out of the stock trailer and bring him here to the ranch to put him in with the other cows. I didn't know if maybe the social interaction with the other animals might be helpful for him, or just being in a bigger area might be better. Even just being out in the sun, I feel like that could have provided some benefit to him as well. So that's what I did. I loaded him up in my little utility trailer and brought him out here to put him in with the other cows. Upon introducing him to the herd, I noticed that every one of the cows here in the corral came up and sniffed him, and a few of the mother cows licked him, and I just thought, this is great. This is what he needs. The other little calf sort of, checked him out. Really, everybody in the herd came to look at him. He took a few labored steps and sort of looked around, but after a few days in the corral, I started to notice that he would sort of get stuck in corners. In other words, I would see him in the same corner of the corral for several days in a row, and I think what was happening is that, again, just not being able to see, he wasn't really able to figure out where he wanted to go. I think, I never saw him walk at a normal gait. It was always very short, cautious steps, and I don't know if that was because he couldn't see where he was going, or if it was because his legs hurt, or what it was. I'm not really sure, but the cow herd, after a few days, more or less ignored him because he wasn't able to move with them. He wasn't able to run with them. I was hoping that he would start to recognize their scent or maybe get a buddy of some sort. And, oftentimes blind calves will sort of just attach themselves figuratively to another calf or cow, and then that way they can still move with the herd because they just follow that calf or cow, their buddy. But that didn't end up happening for him. By this point, his eyes actually looked to be pretty good, almost normal, still not quite, but I don't feel like his vision ever improved. There were times when I thought maybe he was tracking me, and he might have been, but I think he was tracking me with his ears. A few more weeks of this went on with no real change or improvement. Basically, at this point, he was consuming his 2 bottles a day. He wasn't moving very much. He wasn't, changing locations in the corral very much. It was just kind of like he plateaued. When we got to that point, it started to become clear to me that there was really nothing more that I could do for him, and it was time to start making some decisions. And rather than just go straight to the nuclear decision, I decided to give a vet a call and see, if they would come look at him or kind of just what they thought. So I called a vet and I explained to her his condition and sort of his story up to that point. And right away I could tell that her demeanor sort of changed, and she explained to me that, this wasn't sounding good, and that she figured her coming out was probably not even necessary. She basically told me that she wasn't exactly sure what was the matter with him. It could have been a congenital defect. It could have been a viral issue. There were several things that it could be. But she was pretty sure that if his condition, you know, was still what it was at this age and it was no longer getting any better, that it probably never would. Well, and I say probably never would, but really it was that it won't get better. At this point, the little calf's outcome was clear to me. I knew what had to be done, and I know that a lot of people are not going to agree with this decision. And a lot of you suggested that I seek out a farm animal sanctuary or something to that effect to try to give him a chance at life. But the reason why I decided not to do that is because I don't feel that his condition was going to be able to provide him with a good quality of life. A lot of you have said, oh, well, blind calves can make it. Blind calves can make, well, sure, they can. But that's not all that was wrong with him. And maybe I didn't show that very good with my footage, but being blind was only one of many problems that he had. If you're blind and you can't barely walk and you can't do anything that a cow does, I think, and this is my own opinion, but I think that keeping an animal like that alive is a selfish thing for me to do. You just really have to be honest with yourself, and you have to ask yourself, am I prolonging his life because that's what's best for him? Or am I doing that because that's what's easiest for me? So I know that I'm going to catch a lot of flack for what I ended up doing, which, I mean, if you haven't been able to figure it out by now, we did end up putting him down, or I did. And that's never something that I enjoy doing. And in that moment, all I can really tell myself is that, you know, that this isn't about how I feel right now. Right now, it's about doing what's best for the calf. And yeah, that might bother me. That might pop into my head later and make me feel bad. But this is what needs to be done sometimes. I have no doubt that many people watching this video are going to tell me I should have done this different. I should have done that different. And I mean, that's fine. You can have your own opinion about that. But I guess what I would say to those people is just try to keep in mind you're only seeing a small snapshot of everything that happened. You didn't live it like I did. You didn't see the things that I couldn't really show or talk about on camera that led me ultimately to this decision. I know it's easy to make that judgment just based off of what you saw in the video, but you didn't live this for the last few months like I have. So sadly, that is how this story ends. I appreciate everybody reaching out and offering advice on how to help the guy, just sending well wishes. That's all been really great, and I'm really just sorry that I don't have a better outcome for you.